They hired me to do their mobility platform, and that was the first time I had experienced the term IVR. It's the first time I'd ever heard about voicing telephone systems. But then in about 2003, I get a call from Huntsville, Alabama, from this company called Digium.
Welcome to Telecom Disruptors, a podcast that takes a closer look at the people and technology that is changing the way the world communicates. I'm Alan Percy, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Telco Bridges, and your podcast host. In this episode, we're going to talk with Allison Smith, the voice behind many of the Asterisk and other IVR applications. She shares with us how she got into the business of doing voiceovers and how she produces the custom prompts for a wide array of applications.
So voice is an increasingly important part of an application. There's rarely a day that you don't somehow communicate with an application over the telephone or maybe to your computer or maybe to your social media using voice, either listening to voice or playing voice or background with voice. It's increasingly important as part of the way we communicate. But it didn't always start that way. And matter of fact, we're here at IT Expo, and I've been fortunate enough to sit with the lovely Allison Smith, who many of you know. And Allison, thanks for spending a few minutes with us.
Thanks so much, Alan.
All right, so Allison, you've played a very unique role in a big part of this communications industry in being the voice that is behind many applications. As a matter of fact, there isn't a time that I call to make a reservation for my dog grooming by calling PetSmart that I don't listen to you and say, oh, there's Allison. And I think that's kind of a unique thing, and I think you have some fun stories that we'll get to eventually. But let's just start with, how did you get into this?
Well, it was kind of accidental. So I did voiceover, just sort of general stuff, commercials and radio commercials, TV commercials. And it was actually a telephone company in Alberta, where I live in Canada. They hired me to do their mobility platform, and that was the first time I had experienced the term IVR. It's the first time I'd ever heard about voicing telephone systems. Although when I was a kid, I used to call the time and temperature lady all the time. I was obsessed with her. So maybe that was like the starting of that. But then in about 2003, I get a call from Huntsville, Alabama, from this company called Digium. I'd never heard of them. And they had me do some prompts, and I just thought it was kind of a crazy one-off. I really didn't think too much about it. And then I started getting, emails from bunches of different users of Asterisk, and then they invited me to the first Astricon, and that was surreal because I apparently had a fan base and I didn't even know. And I just remember giving myself a pep talk before I went in there going, okay, no one's going to know who you are, so you have to introduce yourself. And I was mobbed. It was crazy.
Well, that's fascinating. It's interesting. I think it's a combination. I think what the original I think attraction for a lot of folks was they had the majority of these prompts already recorded in your voice, and they needed to make some customization, right? And by using your voice for those customizations, it saved them a lot of money by extending their voices. So that was the very early parts of Asterisk and with Digium. But tell me about some of the different applications you've been asked, and specifically, I think what everyone would love to hear is the oddball ones, the weird ones, and then the more mundane sort of mixed in.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly mundane, to tell you the truth. It's very, for this, press that, for that, press this. But yeah, I still continue to do them. It's an ongoing thing. So these are auto dialers that call registered sex offenders to tell them that they're in violation of their parole. It's just so weird. Very, very strange. There was a talking toilet, I presume Japanese manufactured. And so this toilet stall, once it closes, my disembodied voice comes out of somewhere and tells the user of the toilet that the only way the door will open is with their handprint on the back of the door. So it's kind of a safety precaution. But it's just very strange thinking about my voice coming out of a bathroom stall. So that's more of an Internet of Things a voice application, which is kind of where I think it's heading more, is more automated applications away from IVR. But I think IVR is still going to be around, don't you think?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, matter of fact, it's interesting. I've been following the CPaaS marketplace very carefully, right? The communication platform as a service. And one of the key things with that platform is that it enables business applications now to be able to make voice calls, reminder calls. There are probably a lot of those calls that remind you about your doctor's appointments, those kinds of things, school closing, these kind of activities. They need a voice too. Have you gotten involved in any of those applications, or can you tell from your perspective?
Yeah, I think I've done a few things for the National Weather Service that were like automated weather announcements for specific areas and stuff like that. Yeah, school closures, that's a really, really important uh, area. I did do one that actually I voiced prompts that let people know that registered sex offenders had moved into their neighborhood, but I think that was scrapped due to confidentiality issues and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's every day it is literally something different, and it's not the same thing every day, and that's why I love it. It's first of all, the number of industries that I work for is limitless. Yeah, there really is no limit as to the kind of companies that hire me to voice. And yeah, sometimes I'm just astounded at what I'm asked to say.
Right. Matter of fact, it's interesting. I think one of the times you and I crossed paths, soon thereafter, I ended up on, I think it was a BART train, or maybe it was the train that goes in and out of San Francisco Airport. And I was carefully listening to not only the diction of it, but also the word selection. Yeah. And I thought, how unique to have to communicate to somebody, for example, hang on to the handrail. Yes. And to be able to say it in such a way so that people who English is poor maybe can understand it. So, I bet there's probably things way more than just reading the script. I'm just sort of curious as to, what are some of those attributes that are necessary?
I voiced actually a lot of bill collection systems. So these would be automated calls that will inform you that, for example, your credit card account is overdue, and they want kind of a stern voice. Or even if I have to say something like, you have been kicked from the conference, I always try not to say that in a way that will piss off the caller more than it needs to. Like, I still struggle with this idea that I want to be likable, as most humans do. So when I have to say things that are a little less than favorable, I kind of struggle with that a little bit. Not that I have to be nice all the time, but yeah, there's sometimes where a stern voice is definitely called upon. And luckily, with my theater background, I'm a bit more directable in what they want. Yeah. And also, companies are branding a bit more with their IVRs, so they want more personality in their prompts, which I'm always really glad to see. It's not just a matter of instructing the caller. It's if you're a weird startup company and you're kind of irreverent, your IVR should reflect that kind of casual tone. Right. If that makes sense.
It does. It makes perfect sense. Now I'm curious a little bit about the technology behind it. Now I know from my days of developing applications, voicemail applications specifically is what I worked on. We needed voice recordings. They were indexed voice recordings, so they were G711 indexed files. This is back dialogic boards and all that back in the day. So what's the setup like? What's the process of making prompts and doing the recording in your humble home office, as you call it?
Humble home office, yeah. So the technology, at least for me, does not vacillate or change. I don't actually make. Sometimes I'll upgrade microphones, but for the most part, I use WavePad, which is just like a prosumer program. It's not Pro Tools that I use because I just don't need all the multi-channel bells and whistles. For IVR, things just have to be clean and consistent is really, really important. So I just blogged recently about changes to the voice over time. And so that started kind of an interesting discussion with people who read that article on LinkedIn that I wrote. But I have clients that I've recorded for 10, 12 years who say that my prompts that I've recorded now dovetail really well with stuff that I've done even 10 years ago. So my settings do not change. I don't, fiddle with the knobs. It's preset, and it kind of has to be, just due to that consistency.
Right. I can imagine you'd have to have extensive notes for each customer, each recording, which microphone you used. Yeah. And keep it consistent. And the fact that you have an ageless voice doesn't hurt, right?
Let's hope so. I don't know. My financial guy keeps asking, when are you planning on retiring? And I always say, well, probably never. As long as I can still sound like me and not Katharine Hepburn on Golden Pond. Remember how wavery her voice was? Yeah. I'm scared of that, yeah. Oh. But the common cold is actually my biggest enemy. If I get a cold, I can't work.
Oh, wow. No, I hadn't thought of that. Yeah. That's interesting. So anyway, it's been real good having a few minutes here to catch up with you. I think you've shared some real insight as to how the voice comes to an applications, and appreciate your thoughts on that. I'm looking forward to attending your sessions. You got a couple of sessions. You wanted to give us a little peek of what they're about here at the conference?
Absolutely. So the first one I'm doing, which is tomorrow, is 10 ways to create a revenue-generating IVR. So it's more focused on the idea that your IVR can actually generate revenue. The idea behind it is in what it doesn't do. So in other words, I'm trying to get people to think about caller frustration and how I believe the stat is 74% of callers who encounter a confusing IVR will hang up and go to your competition, and that's an astounding number. So I try to get people to think in terms of not preying on callers' attention spans, not presuming that they're longer than they are because they're actually quite short, and caller patience, that kind of thing. Right. The other presentation is for Asterisk World, and it is it's kind of a parallel between IVR acting as the warm-up band for the call center, which is the main stage rock band act. So in other words, it's an exploration of the way that IVR should dovetail well with the call center experience as well. I have some real world examples of recent calls that I've made where the IVR was so frustrating and too complicated to use, and it when I finally got through to a live agent, it was the best experience ever. So I just try to get people to make sure the IVR matches the experience.
Sounds like a great couple of sessions. I look forward to being there to heckle you on as it goes.
You mean encourage, don't you?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, encourage, of course. All right. Well, anyway, thanks so much for your time, and we'll look forward to hearing more from you. We'll check in with you, I'm sure, later this year and hear how things have been progressing.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. All right. And this has been Alan Percy. I'm here at IT Expo 2019. And I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks for listening.
This episode is sponsored by Telco Bridges, makers of free SBC session border controller software and high-performance media and signaling gateways. For more on Telco Bridges, visit telcobridges.com.